Hey everybody, hope you guys are doing well. Hopefully you reset your clocks forward an hour. We lose a hour of sleep, which isn't fun, but such is life. Anyway, I know it's been a while since we've talked. I've kind of been battling illness here for a couple weeks, so I'm not going to go too deep this week, but we'll kind of hit the ground running next week and try to get close to finishing up Luke probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So on page two, I just wanted to refresh everybody where we're at and where we're going in terms of the Gospels. I think because of all that's happened recently, we're pushing Luke a little bit further out than we had originally planned. So it's probably going to leak into beginning of April, and then that'll give us a couple solid months to go over John, which is kind of aligns nicely with Easter. I think that the timing may end up being pretty good. We may adjust some things too around Easter as well, but that's kind of where we're at for now. Okay, so moving forward to page three, this is a page I've shown you a couple times now, but I think it's really important just to remember how Mark, Luke, and Matthew interact. So Mark again came first. He wrote, a very historical account. Not a lot of parables. It was very short, but it just sort of laid the groundwork, right, for both Matthew and Luke to take what Mark did and then expand upon it. So they basically all wrote about the same events, the same time frame of Jesus's life, his ministry, his death, and then the resurrection after that. So again, kind of Mark was first, very short. Then Matthew and Luke were writing roughly at the same time. Matthew, again, focused on a Jewish audience because that was Matthew's background, and Luke is focusing on sort of the non-Jewish audience. And remember, Luke was a doctor, and he was kind of almost had a scientific method about his writing, where lots of interviews, lots of documentation, lots of evidence. And when he talked about Jesus, he wanted to make sure people, had that evidence, right? To make sure they believe him when he talks about what Jesus did. So it was important for him to get all of that documentation and evidence written down. So it's interesting, that the people that were chosen to write these gospels, their backgrounds, and how seriously they took it, because they believed so much that and how important it was to them. And like we've said, 2,000 years later, we're still talking about this. All right, on page four, just a refresher again on what Luke is trying to do. So again, like Mark and Matthew, he believes that Jesus is the true King and Son of God, and his writing is trying to persuade you, convince the audience that Jesus is the true Son of God and why it's important to follow him. Where Luke differs a little bit is a lot more parables. Matthew was really focused on relating Jesus back to the prophecies of the Old Testament because that's what Jewish people would understand. What Luke is doing is a lot more of the persuasive kind of writing to show what Jesus is doing sort of on this earth, but how there's a much bigger picture behind it. How what he's doing in terms of feeding people, healing people, the lessons he's teaching, while they have sort of a meaning on earth, there's a much bigger, larger meaning about heaven and the afterlife and eternal life, right? And the other really key thing that Luke is doing through his gospel is showing that Jesus is perfection, right? That he is the perfect symbol of humanity, and we should all strive for that. We're not perfect, and we know that. We all err, we sin, things happen. We're not Jesus, but you should strive to be as Christ-like as you can be. And one of those key things that Luke talks about is in this perfection, there's a humanity, and it gets highlighted in a number of parables, but Jesus' love for outcasts, right? For the poor, for women, for foreigners, for even tax collectors who were looked down upon by people. So it was a different concept from other religions, which were you had to be sort of born into that particular religion. This was a religion for everybody, if you chose to strive for that perfection Jesus was. And so that's what Luke tried to write about, that this is for everybody. If you accept Jesus, you can have this eternal life, but you have to strive for that perfection. And the other piece that we haven't really dove into yet is after the Gospel of John, the Bible goes into Acts of the Apostles, and that was also written by Luke. And so there are a number of parallels between what's written in the Gospel itself and what's written in Acts, and that's important. But we'll touch on that later. So the last thing I want to leave you with on page 5 here is one of the really key verses in Gospel of Luke, and it's in chapter 9, verses 23 through 25. Then he said to them all, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit his very self?" And honestly, that's really the key to Christianity, right? The idea that Jesus is saying, you have to take up your cross daily and follow me. So what does that mean? If you remember, obviously Jesus died on the cross. He was crucified by the Romans. And before you would get crucified in those days, you had to carry your cross. So nobody chooses to carry a cross. That's something that's forced upon you. And the people of the time, Romans and Gentiles and Jews, they understood if you're carrying a cross, you're going to your death, right? And so he's saying here, on a daily basis, you have to pick up a cross and follow me. Like, you have to do what I'm going to do, right? So remember, Jesus was still alive here, and he's talking about what you have to do to have eternal life. And Jesus knows he's going to die and he's going to be crucified. And so I think that at this point, the disciples are understanding that this is what's going to happen. And Jesus is saying, you have to willingly take up a cross, which means that's your death, right? That eventually that's going to be your death. So, he's saying you have to follow in my footsteps, and some of the footsteps that I take aren't going to be pleasant. But you have to do this because this life here on earth is not nearly as important as your eternal life, the life that you need to have saved, right? And so what he finishes with here is, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit his very self? The idea here is, look, you can be ultra successful, but if you're not doing, taking up this cross daily and following me and my perfection, at least striving to have that perfection, it's not going to do you any good in the long run. And that's what Christianity really is about, is be as close to perfection as you can be on this world, in this world, to have that opportunity to live everlasting life in the next world. And so, I don't know, I found that just as a really concise message in Luke that Jesus says to his disciples and his followers, that this is how you will get eternal life, by taking up your cross daily. So with that, I will leave you. Hopefully you have a wonderful week, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody next week. Thank you.